Good afternoon to all of you. I see that despite the pandemic, 10 of us are online for participating in this brief discussion in our usual lunchtime series covering particular project progress, and obviously we will be talking about the Paris Reinforce project with Evangelos on issues what we have achieved, and also on some issues which are put on hold due to the pandemic and these very particular circumstances. So we are half years through the project, and literally nothing has changed with respect to the partners, with respect to anything what we have planned, and we are in full speed. And when talking about full speed, I think we really need to be very elaborate on the so-called platform, I2AM Paris platform, which is one of the key elements or the underlying information structure or information sharing structure, for which we can now announce that it's working and it's fully functional. Let me just dive into that for a little bit, because this is something where we understand that all of our stakeholders and obviously all of the policymakers would be looking, because that's where our models are represented in a way which we understand has not been done in the past ever. So this basically opens up, I think, a meaningful discussion or a meaningful liaison between the policymakers and the modelers, which is a key goal for the project. But obviously, it's also proved to be a very good exercise for the modelers actually to talk to each other and guarantee and create the way how models are presented in a very structured way, and in a way which is actually comprehensible for anyone else than the modelers. So we do have a dynamic documentation of the models. Then we have the next step, in which anyone who is interested in using models for policy support purposes are able to do a comparative assessment. In other words, is able to actually match the modeling questions or the policy questions with the model capacities. And then obviously, after making such a choice, someone can dive into the detailed model documentation, finding all those black box elements which are usually important, but also finding relevant studies and work coming out from those particular set of modelers. Obviously, this is following modern ages and following the way how we visualize is a heavily visualized system describing particular models. So just picking a particular, I mean, you will see that all of our models, either global or national models, are represented in a graphical interface, and by clicking a particular model, one is able to dive into a very quick representation. So just as an explanation or as an example, let us pick the Times integrated assessment model, which obviously covers a lot, and which I guess is used by a large number of integrated assessment modelers and entering the mainstream discussions for the assessment reports. And then you would immediately have a representation of what is covered, what is not covered, and how that particular model grabs the realities. Obviously, if we just at this moment I'm speaking from Canada, so we can also pick the geographic the model which is representing the North American part of the within the consortium. If you are someone who is interested in the general capabilities and sectors, emissions, measures, connection to the SDGs, policy elements, socioeconomics, then you are able to go to this interface to explore the models. Obviously, this is something which is not entirely dynamic and does not allow for comparisons. That's why we have the second module. So if you are just taking an example, if you are interested in SDGs, which again from non-climate or non-energy policymakers is a very, very are addressing and again allowing you to select those models which could be relevant when someone wants to look at SDG issues. And in the same way, you would be able to ask any question, and you will always be able to see how models are actually treating those particular factors. So I now picked the socioeconomic assessment, and also looking at how population and economic growth, which is a key issue, handled by the particular models. Again, very, very graphical, very easy to follow, and I think very intuitive in a sense that no matter what questions you are interested in, or you might have a fairly general question of what the models can deliver, you would be able to find that information with a click of a button, or with a handful of a click of the buttons. Obviously, on some occasions it's the interactive interface, and what I'm now bringing up are summaries, some of our policy briefs, which again, as with the Horizon 2020 projects, we keep producing in order to provide easy to access elements for all of our stakeholders. So in a nutshell, that's our first major deliverable, which is fully accessible. The other major deliverable, which actually has even received more work, relates to the actual model runs, which lies at the center of the project, and that's where we have major ongoing work. Again, all the modeling teams are talking to each other, figuring out what could be the main research questions for these first modeling runs, how this needs to be done, and obviously now how and whether the pandemic triggered research questions such as GDP contraction and so on can be reflected in these model runs. Again, referring back to the management board discussion of yesterday, we would come forward with some feasible alternatives on how to address issues related to the pandemic and basically related to the expected GDP contraction and all other implications of the project. I think this is a discussion item what we need to come back to, because I guess that's a very valid question for all elements. Allow me just to get a few snapshots on particular events which we have carried out in the first quarter of the year, or what we have not carried out because of the pandemic. And these are really focused around national events where our national modeling teams, based on their existing commitments or engagement, have worked with NECP finalizations, with 2050 planning pathway creation, with national governments around Europe. A handful of those are here referring to the Greek and the Spanish events, and Evangelos may just want to say a few words about the Greek events. Evangelos, can you just quickly jump in and give us a quick summary on how our project has been able to support the Greek policy processes? Thank you.
The national workshop in Greece, it was organized within the framework of Paris Reinforced by NTUA and Holistic in cooperation with two more forums, the Convergences and the HELET, the Hellenic Society for Environment and Culture. There's a little bit of discussion there, quite vivid, regarding whether we should go for large-scale wind farms or more low scale with small windmills, the farms. Also, there were some innovatory solutions, such as the Sky Sails power airborne energy system, which was a little bit which was presented, and also there was a quite interesting session regarding geothermal energy. While also there was a little bit more another section regarding generally the energy savings and the energy policies of energy saving. It was the EU Green Deal was discussed and was presented from a representative of the EU delegation in Greece, the representative, Mr. Kondoyorgos, was presented the EU deal, and also the General Secretary from the Ministry of Energy, Mrs. Zdoku, presented the action plan that the ministry has for the next decade. Also, there were some other innovative or not so well implemented technologies, such as the hydrogen production, and also the prospects of hydrogen as an energy carrier, and how that, and it was declared. It was presented that the barriers that were some decades ago in the hydrogen technology have been tackled, and it is in a good place to, in a good time to large scale, implement it largely. As Zsolt said, we are looking for the COVID-19 and how it will affect our work. Also, we have already recently there has been published the first Paris Reinforced commentary regarding Paris Reinforced. That are the main points that I wanted to discuss.
Thank you, Evangelos. And I guess you now see very, very clearly how I think most of our countries covered are really taking an extremely strong presence in the national policy field, which again, I guess we should also be, candid and open it, that this is not because of the project, but it's the other way around. Because of the embeddedness of our teams in the national policy fields, we do have the project, and that is happening elsewhere, from the UK to Spain and so on with the core European countries, but we are also doing that in India, in Canada, in the global cover. That's also the issue where we do have disruptions, because obviously you can't move a Kenyan policy event to the virtual space. What we tried, and obviously we failed doing that, and these are the elements where we are just simply postponing a handful of project activities. And I think by that we really would like to sort of conclude our sort of description of what is going on, a bit of a discussions for your questions. I mean, anything related to to the project, but I think we would be in particular interested in views, suggestions, questions related on how content-wise or delivery-wise the pandemic could or should be reflected in Paris Reinforce or any of our other projects. And I think this can also be framed that should we have as a foundation a particular view or a particular outreach based on those policy questions or research questions which are actually triggered by the pandemic and by the pandemic recovery plan, which coincides with the Green Deal and with European thinking or the new Commission work related to issues which would have happened without the pandemic anyway, but now obviously these two streams of thinking in my view are heavily becoming interconnected. And I think with that we would like to conclude our sort of introduction of developments and a snapshot of the project, and would like to open up the floor for questions and discussions. Thank you.
Yes, this is Martijn. I have a more general question about the project, Zsolt. About what would be the overall purpose to bring together all these models? What would be the overall goal of it?
I mean, and that's a fundamental question which I think we managed to answer in our bid, but I guess it's important to keep repeating. I think the underlying concept when the sort of value proposition came was that integrated assessment models, or all models, are pretty much black boxes. I mean, apart from the modelers, and even sometimes the modelers have no real ideas how they work and therefore how they are different from each other, what purposes they can be used, what purposes they cannot be used. And obviously there was, I think, a perceived lack of practical use of these models by policymakers, which I guess also links back to this general black box nature, complexities and difficulties in understanding the models. So in this respect, we had this huge ambition of bringing together the modelers, and it's again it's a rather sizable modeling a community covering 19 various models. Many of them have been around for decades. So helping them to find the common platform to actually discuss, elaborate and disclose these details, and at the same time providing that reach out which ensures that these models are being used by the policymakers. And I guess these two are heavily interconnected, because I guess as soon as you are able to present a large number of models in a transparent way, then you are obviously able to stand up saying that what are the key features of particular models, which then can relate to a particular policy question. And then, you know, even the person who is raising these questions, or who is in a policy formulation or policy evaluation situation, should be able to make a valid and valuable judgment on what to use and what not to use. And I think that's more or less the overall purpose of the project, of one hand bringing together or closer the modeling community, where obviously competition and cooperation are the key features, but any ground which allows for a sort of transparent discussion is of great help. And the other goal, on which I guess the national discussions in Greek or in Spain, or the EU discussions on the Green Deal, are good examples where the policymakers are able, willing and keen to listen to policymakers. And I think that's also a point where I would argue very, very strongly that the pandemic, which is a very big unknown, I mean, it's a black swan event with fundamental consequences for our future, should trigger a lot of questions. And I think some of those questions can actually be even not even answered, but at least insights and valuable views can be provided by modelers, and that's, I mean, it's really a unique opportunity to reflect on changes or address these needs. But obviously this is not part of the design. This is just something where we try to sort of react to the realities, and that's why we started and initiated these discussions. And the commentary by Glenn Peters is a good example of how in early March our team has already started discussing implications of COVID-19 for policymakers, for modelers, and for deliverables for the project. On behalf of Evangelos and myself, I just want to thank you for participating in the lunch discussion. I hope that you have munched your food and got some ideas from us. And I guess wishing you all the best for coping with this unprecedented times. And I hope that, well, this will be over soon, and we will all learn a lot, and we will, I guess, create a better world after this. Thank you very much.